How's it going, everyone? It's TheStarkz here, and welcome to the very first and hopeful installment of TLOU, the not-so-educated TED Talk series on everything that is The Last of Us, Naughty Dog, and gaming related. This particular episode, which I'm going to be calling Parts, will dive right into The Last of Us Part 2 and its emotionally raw and often traumatizing story, which finds Ellie embracing a new adventure, but this time to avenge one person she loves the most, Joel. However, before we jump right in, I'd like to offer a quick disclosure. The next several minutes will include nothing but potential spoilers for both The Last of Us and its sequel. This video will contain my insight and feelings regarding mainly Ellie and Abby in The Last of Us Part 2. With that said, this breakdown TLOU video is intended to take a deeper look into the poetic motifs, narrative structures, followed by other examinations related to and from The Last of Us, and anything that I can find that will help support the subjective discussion. So without further delay, kick back and enjoy the episode. The Last of Us Part 2 is a story mainly about hate and the endless cycle of violence that echoes throughout this impactful and powerfully made video game. The Last of Us Part 2 is essentially a story about revenge times 4. There are 4 different and sometimes distinct revenge narrative arcs, all of which collectively finds themselves in the mind of Ellie as she contemplates her final moments with Joel through spiritual flashbacks before Ellie leaves the barn and travels back to where she came from, as the game slowly fades to black and the credits begin to roll. It's this subtle representation of good storytelling that I believe only open-minded people can fully grasp and come to understanding. I've said it before and I'll say it again, but this game requires a second playthrough for people to completely understand the complexity of the narrative, which I believe both Neil Druckmann and Haley Gross did an exceptional job in creating for Part 2's story. However, what about the thematic of revenge, and how does that truly connect back to the cycle of violence clearly present in Part 2's story? Well, fundamentally, this story only exists through violence and the apparent endless cycle of it. It's Ellie who holds the key to stopping what I think it could have led to continuous revenge arcs and ultimately result in more violence. The truth of the matter is, Ellie represents a lamb engulfed by wolves metaphorically. She needs to recondition her primal instincts to go on this unforgettable quest, which she does. It's been established how Ellie can be a ruthless killer as seen in the first game, but due to the comfort 5 years has had on her, that past felt forgotten for a while. This, of course, had to abruptly end with the violent death of Joel, reminding Ellie that this world doesn't function peacefully. Thus, Abby's actions initiate the next 20-odd hours or so of The Last of Us Part 2's incredible revenge story. It was Abby's full intentions to kill Joel that one unfaithful snowy day, but it was also Abby's violent actions that led to more violent outcomes. The act that Joel committed 5 years ago in the hospital does not justify the torture in which Abby inflicts onto the man responsible in killing her father, eliminating the potential creation of a vaccine, poisoning the world through love rather than selflessness. An act I'm sure any father would do to save their loved one. But that's the thing though, Abby felt so determined to kill Joel, assuming without extracting any intel as to why he did what he did to begin with, without any understanding as to why Joel killed her father and all those fireflies that one day. And that's where the cycle begins. Abby would never become aware that her choices would have devastating consequences later on, and that realization does not become clear until the final moments we play as Ellie, when the game takes a U-turn and directs us on an entirely new journey, one that no video game that I've ever played has ever done before. The Last of Us Part 2 forces us to play as the one person that kills Joel, this beloved character that many came to adore. Meaning, in short, we play as the perceived antagonist, even though the game tries to make us understand why Abby did what she did. To this day, I still think Abby is in the wrong, just as Joel was, and that her actions are what leads to this journey more so than Ellie's. This unsettling at first, but reasonable narrative choice is what makes The Last of Us Part 2 so great in my opinion. This particular cycle of violence and revenge has yet to be learned among Abby and Ellie. Ellie goes on this revenge quest to kill each person responsible in killing Joel, and in doing so slaughters quite a few enemies to do just that. Let's ignore that simple fact, though, and focus directly on the characters who are significant to the plot, rather than enemy AI, that really nobody cared about. The people integral to the plot were Jordan, Leah, Nora, Owen, Mel, Manny, and Abby. The first cycle of violence and revenge is Abby's, where she decides many years after the fact that she'll go on this voyage across the country to find and kill Joel. Keep in mind that it was always and will always remain to be Joel's singular actions that cause Abby to go on this revenge quest to begin with, but it's also Abby's will to have done so, just as it was Ellie's. However, the person that initiates this revenge quest is simply Abby in my opinion, because she could have realistically stuck it to the grave and moved on. The second cycle is Ellie's, in which she decides to go after those responsible in killing Joel. The third cycle is Abby's, in which she goes after Tommy and Ellie to kill them after discovering Mel and Owen dead. Now, this along with the fact that Manny gets killed by Tommy, and I hope that I can make a separate video discussing Tommy in greater depth somewhere down the line. And lastly, the fourth and final cycle is Ellie's, where she goes off to Santa Barbara to finish off Abby and anyone that gets in her way. In doing so, Ellie initiates the final stage of violence and revenge. Abby lets Ellie and Dina live, which would have been the final stage, but Ellie's thirst for revenge and closure is what brings her to this obsession with violence. Anything lost in this final stage is Ellie's fault. Had Ellie killed Abby, that's on her. Had Ellie killed Lev, that's also on her. The two fingers which Ellie loses is also on her, preventing Ellie from being able to fully play the guitar completely ever again. A complete gift from Joel. Ellie loses her mother's switchblade also in the process of beating up Abby, and ends up absolutely alone both in spirit and physical presence. Ellie nearly loses herself. These four distinct actions that both characters take collectively is what forms this continuous loop of revenge that eventually gets shattered by Ellie after snapping out of what could have transformed into a series of more violence, as mentioned earlier. These repetitive actions begin to break the characters involved in making them as they start to lose themselves in the process. There's so much grief and anger that by the time Ellie swings at Abby during the final boss fight, I was so much very displeased by her actions more so than Abby's. I was beginning to lose my trust in Ellie, this once upon a time vulnerable child raised with reason and love. With part 2 though, this vengeance brings unpredictability and devastating outcomes which I nor Ellie thought possible. Because even though Ellie is torn by Joel's death, she started to become the true villain within herself. However, it was Joel's love that conquered in the end. Ellie stops herself from killing the one person responsible and inflicting all of this pain and suffering and death, and in doing so completely breaks the cycle of violence, revenge, and ultimately learns how to forgive. Ellie saves Abby and Lev, and no matter how you look at it, no matter how much Ellie lost, her hate and hunger for revenge is done so through nothing but love, right? And this is what makes this game so powerful to me. If Ellie's choice, if this narrative choice bothers you, which I've heard many cry over this, then I urge you with every ounce of energy in my body to replay The Last of Us Part 2. This game is not meant to cater to unrealistic expectations. It supports realism and grounded character arcs, all of which Naughty Dog captured brilliantly in my opinion. And I do believe, without a doubt, that The Last of Us Part 2 is a masterpiece, one that takes time to play and fully understand. Thank you for listening to the very first part of TLOU Talks. As I implied earlier, my intentions with this series is to have a sole discussion about the world of The Last of Us. Now, I'm excited to introduce more episodes where I discuss different things related to its universe, and I fully encourage everyone that may still be watching this video to leave a comment below telling me your thoughts regarding the cycles of violence. I want to know your thoughts about the game, and if you liked it or you disliked it. Do you support Ellie's decision not to kill Abby? Let me know. I also hope that you genuinely enjoyed watching this video as much as I enjoyed making it. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and liking the video as it really helps me out. Thank you for your support, and as always, I have been TheStarkz. Peace.